Deep in the wild, peaceful camps can tear apart in the blink of an eye. Far from the beaten path and away from well-worn trails, everything can shift without warning. Canvas walls shred, roaring beasts smash through flimsy protection, and even the earth itself can betray you. Predators don't just prowl, they strike with unimaginable power, and familiar creatures may transform into terrifying danger in a heartbeat. Imagine a lone camp in eastern Russia. Then picture a savage brown bear, weighing more than a small car, moving through tents like they're paper, leaving carnage in just minutes. Or consider a massive boar that breaks free from its enclosure and turns a peaceful lodge into a war zone. These are not tales. These are real events that pushed humans to the brink. In the remote Ussuri wilderness of far eastern Russia, a land bordering China and North Korea, lies a forest so ancient it seems untouched by time. Once home to Siberian tigers, this area remains dominated by gargantuan brown bears. Locals tell chilling stories, bears so enormous they could push over trees, and the Nanai people warn outsiders to never go deep into these woods during autumn, when the beasts fatten for winter. On September 1, 2025, 12 hardened hunters from across Russia set up camp in a small clearing, nearly 40 kilometers from any road. Their leader, Alexei Volov, had brought them to hunt boar and elk during the early autumn season. Among them were Viktor Petrov, a former military officer, and Sergei Klov, a woodsman who had spent decades in this unforgiving terrain. They carried powerful rifles, Mosin Nagant, Sako, 85, and heavy slug shotguns, ready for any big game encounter. They trekked through dense underbrush for 3 days, confident their canvas tents formed a secure perimeter. On the night of September 1, an eerie fog rolled in, and temperatures dropped sharply. Exhausted, the hunters hit their cots around 9 p.m., their weapons stored close by. At about 11:30 p.m., silence exploded. The first tent, belonging to Dmitry Arov and Pavel Nikitin, was torn open by something massive. The two men barely had time to react before a monstrous brown bear, later estimated to weigh over 1,600 pounds, and standing nearly 10 feet tall on its hind legs, crushed into their shelter. It seemed drawn either by food or raw territorial instinct. The bear's attack was both sudden and brutal. Claws shredded, sleeping bags. Flesh was ripped apart. Dmitry was struck even as Pavel scrambled for his rifle, but the flimsy canvas offered no defense. In seconds, both men were fatally mauled. The chaos alerted the rest of the hunters. Viktor Petrov, shaken, grabbed his Sako 85 and emptied 2 rounds into the beast. Bullets tore through fur and muscle, yet the bear barely flinched. If anything, it grew more enraged, pivoting with frightening speed toward Victor's position. Claws and teeth struck. His rifle flew into the darkness. Other hunters tried to respond. Sergei Kov and 3 companions formed a defensive line, firing slugs from their guns. Muzzle flashes cut through the fog like lightning as desperate men fought for survival. Yet the bear didn't hesitate. It darted between tents, toppling poles, tossing gear aside as though it weighed nothing. Mickey Volgin and Andrei Sukov attempted to flee into the tree line, but the bear struck them down before they could reach safety. At the camp's edge, Gregorovich and Dmitry Vasiliev watched in horror as the predator advanced. Meanwhile, 2 hunters made a different choice. They hid. Ivan and Dmitry crawled beneath a fallen log, knocked down earlier in the chaos, pressing their bodies into the cold ground, hearts pounding, as the rampage continued overhead. From their hiding place, they watched the bear move with grim purpose. Not random violence, but systematic elimination. Hunters like Anton Kirilov, Boris Fedov, and Gennady Marov made final stands near their tents. Shots rang out, but their ammo was powerless against this titan. In less than 3 minutes, though for Ivan and Dmitry it felt eternal, the slaughter was over. 10 of their comrades lay dead or fatally wounded across the wrecked site. When the bear finally paused, it stood in the wreckage, its thick fur stained red, surveying its work. Overturned rifles, mangled tents, scattered gear, and dark pools of blood formed a grotesque tableau of destruction. Then, as quickly as it had arrived, the bear dissolved into the misty forest, leaving only the ragged breaths of the survivors behind. Ivan cautiously reached for a portable radio, knocked free by the carnage. His voice trembled as he contacted the ranger station, begging for rescue. By morning, the ranger team arrived and found a scene that would haunt them forever. Tracks from the bear trailed off into the vast Usuri wilderness, a chilling reminder that in this land, nature reigns supreme. Thousands of kilometers west, in Romania's Carpathian Mountains, a completely different nightmare was unfolding. The region, with its oak and beech forests, had long been a prized hunting ground for European elites. It drew wealthy sportsmen to exclusive lodges, promising controlled hunts, gourmet meals, and reinforced enclosures they said were bear and boar-proof. In October 2019, three experienced hunters, Anton Miller from Austria, Klaus Brenner from Germany, and Henry Dubois from France, came to one such lodge. They carried high-powered 300 Winchester Magnum rifles and expected a refined trophy experience. The lodge was grand, timber beams, panoramic windows, climate-controlled rooms, and spacious dining halls lined with mounted trophies from past hunts. But that evening, their celebration at dinner was disturbed. Strange noises echoed from the boar enclosures. Staff had reassured them that the animals were secured, but the sounds suggested otherwise. Klaus urged a check. Henry hesitated. Anton trusted the barriers. No sooner had debate stopped than a colossal wild boar, estimated at over 700 pounds, burst through reinforced gates. Its tusks flashed in chandelier light. The gates, steel and wood, bent like twigs under the weight and rage of the beast. The boar charged into the main lodge hall. Heavy oak furniture splintered. Rifles were knocked aside by flying debris. Anton dove behind a massive dining table. Klaus scrambled for the fireplace. Henry tried to reach and exit, but the boar blocked his path. Shots rang out from their rifles. The 300 Winchester Magnum rounds tore through hide and fur, but the boar's momentum and fury were unstoppable. It battered through the space, lunging at legs, claws and tusks, wreaking havoc as the hunters tried to defend themselves. Furniture cracked, walls groaned, and every piece of the lodge felt the force of the animal's anger. Anton stayed shielded by the overturned table, feeling vibrations resonate through the wood. As the boar advanced, Klaus fired again, grazing the boar's shoulder. But it barely slowed. For terrifying minutes, they struggled. Staff barricaded themselves in the kitchen and called local authorities. Henry maneuvered toward a side exit, while Anton and Klaus kept the boar's attention focused with defensive shots. Finally, the beast, perhaps exhausted or disinterested, turned and fled into the darkness from which it came. When silence returned, the lodge lay in ruin. Broken timber, shattered glass, deep gouges in the walls, and scattered weapons. Those elite hunters realized a horrifying truth. Even in safe, luxurious settings, wild animals can become lethal adversaries when driven by rage and instinct. Yet another tale of survival comes from northern Alberta, Canada, where brutal winters and massive wildlife make every expedition a gamble. In November 2017, hunter Soren Kale traveled from Minnesota to chase a legendary bull moose during the rut. He carried a Sacco 85 rifle and a backup Browning 1. That morning, the temperature was around 15 grados. He set up in a stand of black spruce, roughly 8 kilometers from base camp, trailing fresh tracks that promised a trophy-sized bull. Mid-morning, he spotted the beast, a giant moose with antlers spanning over 5 feet, steam rising from its nostrils as it browsed. But as Soren prepared to fire, the sky darkened. Light snow turned into a brutal blizzard. Visibility dropped to just a few yards. Wind gusted, snow swirled, and his shot, aimed for a clean, ethical kill, went wide, striking the moose's shoulder instead. Wounded and panicked, the moose charged blindly through the storm. Soren slipped on icy ground, barely dodging its destructive rush. The wildlife and the weather both threatened his life. For what felt like hours in the blizzard, Soren and the moose circled each other in a deadly dance. At times he fired warning shots into the air, hoping to drive the animal off without hurting it more. But the bull kept coming, fueled by adrenaline and confusion. Over time, blood loss weakened it. Its charges slowed, became erratic, as it favored its injured shoulder. Finally, the moose vanished into the storm, leaving behind deep tracks in the growing snow. Soren waited in the log he'd taken refuge behind, listening. The wind howled, the snow fell. Then he slowly made his way back to camp, through knee-deep snow, lost landmarks, and hypothermia. He arrived hours later, shaken but alive. He survived not just a rifle shot, but nature itself. And in the wilds of Alaska, one of the most dangerous standoffs unfolded on Kodiak Island. In August 2021, Marcus Thaler journeyed from Colorado into heart of bear country, having successfully hunted elk earlier in his trip. He rested beside his truck, exhausted from days of travel. Suddenly silence shattered again. From thick spruce brush emerged a monstrous Kodiak grizzly, later estimated at over 1,500 pounds. It seemed drawn to his truck by the scent of elk blood and meat. At first it circled curiously, sniffing the vehicle, scratching at the metal. Then its claws gouged the metal, nails chanting an ominous scratch that chilled Marcus to the bone. He tried to escape. He started the engine. But the bear, towering on its hind legs, interpreted the noise as a challenge. It smashed through the driver's side window, sending glass everywhere. Marcus dove across the bench seat. Claws lunged, jaws snapped. The cabin became a nightmare. In a desperate rush, he seized his Remington 700 and fired through the windshield. The bullet grazed the bear's shoulder, but didn't stop it. The beast rocked the truck violently, trying to crush its way in. Inside, Marcus drew his hunting knife, stabbing at massive paws and snout whenever he had the chance. The bear's hide was thick, its strength was terrifying, but Marcus held on. For minutes, the truck shook. Cushions tore, metal bent, gear flew everywhere. Still, he fought. Then, as if fed up, or finally feeling the resistance, the grizzly withdrew. It lumbered out of the vehicle and into the forest. Bleeding, gasping, Marcus survived. He realized something chilling. In this wilderness, even a vehicle, something most people praise for safety, offered no guarantee against a determined apex predator. Finally, in September 2018, hunter Darius Ivanov faced a standoff he would never forget. He had obtained one of the limited permits to hunt Kodiak bears on the steep coastal slopes of the island. Armed with a powerful Ruger Hawkeye chambered in .30-75 H&H Magnum, he embarked under the brittle light of dawn. Tracking bear footprints along narrow, rocky trails, he walked carefully, terrain so steep and treacherous that one wrong step could be fatal. Without warning, he turned a bend and came face to face with a massive bear, less than 30 meters away. The beast launched itself at Darius instantly, with speed that belied its size. He fired, but his bullet hit far forward, not enough to stop the charge. So he ran. He threw down his backpack, sprinting toward a nearby spruce tree. Seconds later, he was scrambling up the trunk. The bear followed. To his horror, it climbed too, claws hungrily gripping bark, powerful limbs hauling it upward. The tree buckled under its weight, branches snapping like brittle bones. From about 15 feet up, Darius fired downward, grazing the bear's shoulder. It roared in anger, then resumed climbing, its eyes locked on him. The tree shook. Sweat, fear, and adrenaline mixed in his veins. For nearly 10 minutes, they battled. He fired again and again. The bear clawed, the branches snapped, the trunk swayed violently under the pressure of both lives pressing on it. Somehow, Darius kept firing, keeping the bear at bay. Wounds accumulated on its body. Slowly, exhaustion and blood loss slowed its attacks. Eventually, the bear abandoned the tree. It climbed down stiffly, every step betraying its pain. It melted back into the alderbrush where it had come from. Darius stayed up in the tree for half an hour, listening for any sign of a return. Then carefully he descended and gathered his gear. That encounter left Darius changed. He gained a profound respect for Kodiak bears, their intelligence, resilience, and raw power. He had believed a tree would save him. He was wrong. It was a lesson that nearly cost him his life, in a wilderness where mistakes are not forgiven. These 6 stories share a terrifying truth. Whether under canvas, inside a lodge, behind a rifle, or high in a fir tree, nature holds the ultimate power. In these frozen forests, thick shadows, and misty mountains, humans are not always the apex predator. If you found this frightening and fascinating, hit like, and don't forget to subscribe to Winds of Thought for more incredible tales of survival, wilderness, and the raw force of nature.